Diversity, Star Wars. We're here finally talking about Star Wars and diversity. How the diversity in Star Wars changed once Disney took over. How suddenly we had films with female leads in them. We're looking at Rey and Jyn Erso. How the cast overall became more diverse. We're looking at Finn and Rose and the entire cast of Rogue One. And even with The Mandalorian as well, we're beginning to see more and more female directors come into Star Wars. There were female directors working on both Rebels and Resistance, but the light wasn't really shone on them until The Mandalorian. This is all incredibly positive. Star Wars hasn't ever really been dominated by one specific demographic, but it's now finally fully recognizing everybody else. That's not to say that it didn't in the past, like of course it did, but now since the Disney takeover, since really The Force Awakens, we're beginning to see more female characters and more characters of other races, and that's kind of what this video is going to be about, taking a look at how diversity has changed in Star Wars, what it means, why it's amazing, and because I kind of love this galaxy even more for it, and we're just gonna have a really fun, wicked time with this. Okay, should we start? Let's do this. Yes, welcome back to Hakuna MaChatter, the diversity in film and television discussion channel, helping you to better understand the importance of diversity in film and TV. Star Wars has always been a story that has inspired people from all walks of life. Like, I was first introduced to Star Wars when I was 6 years old. This is over 20 years ago now, and it is kind of the only thing that ever really blew my mind, like insanely blew my mind, like changed how I viewed everything. And I'm sure that's a story for lots of people out there. But like, think about it. Think about how you got to this video. Think about how I got to making this video. Like, we've come from completely different paths, and yet Star Wars still kind of kicked that off, no matter who we were watching, no matter who was represented. The only difference now is that the faces we're seeing on screen and the faces that are working behind screen on Star Wars as well are becoming more representative of the world that we live in. Star Wars has always had a central core audience, the people that grew up with it when it initially came out in the 70s and 80s, to the people that joined back in with the re-releases, with the prequel trilogy. But now a new generation has come in again, and this time around it wasn't just kids. I mean, I kind of get the idea that it was mainly kids that sort of jumped onto this bandwagon when either their parents were showing it to them for the first time. Of course, slightly different when it originally came out, but now we're at a time where I believe even adults are becoming more curious about what Star Wars is, and I think the diversity has got a lot to do with that. I mean, as far as I've seen, the impact of Rey Skywalker has been unquantifiable. Every time I've been to Comic-Con in London since this new crop of films have come out, I'm pretty sure that Rey is the single most cosplayed Star Wars character out there. I have no idea if that is a fact, but this is what I've witnessed. I mean, maybe Kylo Ren is up there as well. A lot of people still cosplay stormtroopers, but not like they do Rey. Young girls and adult women have found their lead woman to rally behind. And of course we wouldn't have got there if Leia, Padme and Ahsoka hadn't paved the way for her. I mean, Leia taught us not only to fight for what is right, but to find people to fight for. Padme taught us that sometimes we have to work outside of our duty if we are to find liberty. And Ahsoka taught us to believe in ourselves, to believe in our abilities, and that maybe if something doesn't hold the purpose for us it once did, it's okay to walk away. But the reintroduction of Star Wars films, they kind of called for a female lead. It was sort of time, wasn't it? The boys, we had our time leading. Luke and Anakin it was great to follow their stories and see them grow and become and change and fall and everything they went through. But now was the time for a female lead. Having strong female characters is one thing. Having a female lead, that's something entirely different. No longer were our women just there in support of the male story. They were the story. And look, the Star Wars universe is seemingly endless. Whenever we get a new film or a new program, there are planets we've never heard of before. It is ever expanding, the same in books and comics as well. And so it was kind of time for the big screen to take a look at a character we'd never seen before, and this is why I believe that they took the angle of having Rey. And what was nice is that Rey's story was never about her being a woman. It was about her being an orphan and a scavenger. Star Wars never really made the point of Rey being a woman, and never was it ever used against her. Slave Leia. In the end, it was just kind of something the fans did, I believe anyway. I mean, think about it. Look at Rey's story. If you swapped her out for a male character or even a non-binary character, what actually changes in her story? No, nothing. Exactly. It's the best kind of storytelling. Hell, you could have even swapped her out for an alien race and it still would have been the same character. Of course, on the other side, it was still important that this was a story about a woman. And why is that important? Well, look, guys, we aren't the only people that are fans of Star Wars. There are others out there. Whoa. And I'm sure none of you are going to kind of dispute that. It'd be weird that you did, but why do we always have to have male-led films in Star Wars? Answer is we don't. So when the opportunity is there to have female leads, why not do it? Especially in the Skywalker saga, the main brunt of films. Let's give someone else the toys to play and have a bit of fun, because as I've said, and something I'm going to say a million times in this video, the Star Wars universe is massive. There are so many people. We don't know really how many people still connect to the Skywalkers. So, yo, let's find some people, let's create their stories and let's tell them, because as soon as you start to tell stories of other people, you get different perspectives, and really the only way we grow as humans is to learn the perspectives of other people. So, and I think that film and the arts and theatre and TV is such a great way for us to learn about each other, and especially when it's done in a way that is still enjoyable and still has an entertainment value about it. And that's what Star Wars always did. Like, people who kind of go crazy and say that Star Wars isn't about politics, please go back and watch the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Of course it's about politics, it's about discussion, it's about learning who we are and learning what is good and what is evil and finding that separation and how we can succumb to the evil or how we can find the light. What's really great about Rey's journey is that she goes through all of that. She tastes the darkness, she ultimately chooses the light, and it was really interesting to see how her journey was very similar to both Anakin and Luke, how she kind of went through the same things that they both did and the outcome that she came with that. Everything that I'm saying here about Rey, bar the more personal parts of her journey, it all goes for Jyn Erso as well, in placing a woman at the front charge of these new stories where women haven't been in the lead at first. And so I'm not going to go into detail about Jyn. I think I can kind of cover the same sort of things about her within what I say about Rey. Instead, I'm going to use Rogue One as a jumping off point for race diversity instead, because it's something that Rogue One kind of did, like it just kind of slipped it in there. And I don't think anyone really noticed until after having watched the film and they sort of sat back and went, hang on a second. You know, because in the Star Wars universe, black people have been represented through Lando and Mace Windu, and I'll touch onto that in a little bit, but really, truly speaking, Asians and Latinos, for example, hadn't really been represented properly, and so Rogue One took the opportunity to go, well, why don't we do this? And kind of why not? Because in the end, what it did is it expanded that Star Wars universe again, and it kind of made it feel that, yeah, all people are coming together to join the rebellion and fight against the Empire. Like, this is how much this civil war is affecting the galaxy, that we're not just getting alien races coming in, we're getting more human races coming in, which previously we hadn't really seen in the Star Wars world. And it really brought a different quality to Rogue One that made it feel insanely unique, but very much part of the Star Wars universe. Okay, so let's talk about The Force Awakens and how we had the story of a stormtrooper. How mental is that? In the whole of the original trilogy, we never learned anything about the stormtroopers, bar them just being these faceless soldiers for the Imperial Army. We didn't really learn about the clones in Attack of the Clones, bar them being this faceless army for the Republic. So Force Awakens brought a new flavour, something that was really unexpected, and then it took it a step further, and it was like, yo, this stormtrooper's a black guy, by the way. People didn't know how to react to that. I remember when the first trailer popped up and, you know, we sort of had the shot of the Jakku landscape and then up pops Finn's head and it's like, whoa, that's a stormtrooper without his helmet on. And I know a lot of people, I think at first were trying to be like, oh, how can there be a black stormtrooper? And I'm like, how do you know that there can't be a black stormtrooper? Like, how do you know what the stormtroopers look like? Nobody knows what a stormtrooper looks like under that helmet. For all you know, the Empire was all black stormtroopers. And then obviously people tried to be like, yeah, maybe it's just kind of like a Luke and Han situation and he's taken the armor and so on. Like, it was just, people couldn't fathom into their minds how Finn could be a black stormtrooper. I mean, I was excited. I was like, all right, we got a black guy leading this now. This is this is going to be different. This, you know, it told me that The Force Awakens, though continuing on from Return of the Jedi, it was like, no, we're in a completely different era of Star Wars now. And that first trailer dropped, and I was like, okay, this is real. This is gonna be insane. And hey, look, it was. I mean, my first watch of Force Awakens, I wasn't like incredibly taken by it, but the more I've watched that film, the more I've grown on it. I mean, Finn was an instant hit for me, as I know he was for a lot of people. You know, previously we'd had some okay black characters, I guess. Like Lando was great. Mace Windu, yeah, like it's Samuel L. Jackson, right? So it's kind of all I can really say about Mace Windu. Like within the prequel trilogy, he didn't really go through a character arc that you could write home about. The biggest thing that he does, he ends up dying trying to do it. So that was kind of it, you know. It's kind of like the only power Mace Windu really had was to have a different color lightsaber. But with Lando, you know, we had something a bit more interesting, and in the end he became this prestigious general of the rebellion, but he was also just sort of a minor cog in someone else's story. What I think a lot of people get confused about is when they talk about representation, they're just like, yeah, but you had Lando, and yeah, but you had Mace Windu, and yeah, but there was Leia, and yeah, but there was Amidala, and it was like, yeah, but that's not necessarily how representation works. It's one thing putting these people on screen and creating these characters. It's a different thing with how these characters are represented. It's not just who is represented, it's how they're then represented. And if you specifically take a look at Lando, he was first given to us as this snake and this traitor to his old friends Han and Chewie. And, you know, it was until 3 years later that we learned, oh, actually, you know, Lando is this really cool guy that actually ends up helping the rebellion and saving the galaxy from the Empire. So, and this is why people went crazy for Finn and people went crazy for Rey being the two lead faces of Star Wars. And the same with Rey as a woman. Finn's race is never made a part of the story. But again, like, people still find ways of talking about it, and it's interesting. You know, I see a lot of comments on Twitter, as this was especially around when The Rise of Skywalker came out, and how people were trying to say that Finn was only the stereotypical black comedy relief of the sequel trilogy, just the whole sequel trilogy. And to a point, like, yeah, sure, he was funny, but, you know, so was Poe, so was Rey, Chewie, 3PO, like everyone had their comedy moments. BB-8, it wasn't as if all the comedy was thrust onto Finn's shoulders. And actually a lot of these tweets that were going out, they actually kind of missed out a lot of the things that Finn did achieve throughout these films. He escapes the First Order, freeing Poe in the process. He delivers BB-8 to the Resistance with the help of Rey and Han and Chewie. He gives the Resistance vital information for taking out Starkiller Base. He faces off with Kylo Ren, an opponent he is very much outmatched by. He ends up killing Phasma in The Last Jedi, as well as finding his place in the Resistance and discovering that he was willing to die for them. He becomes a general within the Resistance, and he takes down the flagship of the Final Order, stopping all other ships from leaving Exegol. And most importantly, he was one half of the first conversation between two black characters in a Star Wars film, him and Jannah. I kind of feel that this conversation was really short and went unnoticed by a lot of people, but it wasn't missed by me. I kind of realized that, well, hang on, 40 years of Star Wars, and this is the first on-screen conversation between two black characters. It's a monumental moment, like, finally. Thank you. And this loops back to my point of earlier of saying it's not just who is represented, but how are they represented as well. And here we have these two characters connecting on where they came from, being stormtroopers originally in the ranks of the First Order, and how now that they fight against the tyranny of these oppressors. And it's like, this is awesome, man. This is so cool just to see these guys have fun and discover things about each other that are similar and what they now fight for and how they now go on to help the Resistance, and they risk their lives again at the end of Rise of Skywalker just to take down one ship. That conversation, it might seem crazy small to you, but it was massive for me. And if it was massive for you, let me know in the comments. I want to know what moments were meant the world to you. And I think that's what it boils down to. What might not mean anything to you means hell a lot to someone else. There'll be moments in The Rise of Skywalker I played off and be like, yeah, whatever. Someone goes, no, dude, that was freaking awesome. And that's the nice thing about Star Wars now, is that the fact that this universe has opened up to more and more people and it's growing. Like, look at everything that has come out since Disney took over. We had Rebels, the sequel trilogy, the anthology films, The Mandalorian, Clone Wars has returned, Star Wars Resistance. There is so much content for us to enjoy out there now, for everyone to enjoy as well. The fact that we have to sit here and nitpick things in the way that we do, it's like, just why not just talk about what you love? Which is why I'm here talking about the diversity of Star Wars now, because I loves to see it. With all this in mind, I kind of get really excited for the High Republic because it's a completely new era within Star Wars. And sure, it's only books and comics to begin with, and I'm sure it'll expand out into film and TV media as well. But this is a real opportunity for Disney and Lucasfilm to include everyone, like just represent everybody. And you know, they're doing well now with gender and race diversity, and I really hope that they start to expand past that as well. There were flitterings in The Rise of Skywalker where we might begin to deal with sexual orientation diversity as well, and I really hope that they expand on that, because it's an area that Star Wars, I don't understand why it's kind of not gone there yet, and it could be something that they want to, you know, if they're going to do it, they want to tell it properly. I don't know that they, for me at least, they didn't really do it justice in Rise of Skywalker, but then it wasn't for me. I don't identify in that way. So maybe there is someone that does identify in that way, and it was great. You felt represented at that moment. Let me know either way. I'd be interested to hear what you thought if you do identify in that way. So I'd like to give a few recommendations then within the Star Wars world of what to watch. And I would say at this point, if you've never watched any of Star Wars, I don't know how you got to this video, but bravo. And if you've got to this point of the video, triple bravo, thank you very much. Just go watch all of it. Get Disney Plus and just watch all of Star Wars. Everything you need is on there. I mean, it will vary region to region, of course, but you've got the main films up until The Last Jedi, as well as the anthology films. You've got The Mandalorian, you've got the Clone Wars, you've got Rebels. Dive in, get to know it, get to see how Star Wars has evolved to becoming a more diverse universe, a more inclusive universe. It's really only going to get better from here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video as well, it's happening off screen as well. I'm currently watching the Mandalorian series. We're about halfway through that now. And we just had the episode that was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and she managed to make AT-STs scary. And I don't know if y'all remember AT-STs from Return of the Jedi, but they got taken down by Ewoks and tree logs. Like, that wasn't scary. But they were in this episode of The Mandalorian, and I'm not here saying that a male director couldn't do that, but Bryce Dallas Howard did do that. She made me see AT-STs in a way I'd never seen them before. And this is what happens when you begin to bring different people in to diversify these projects and lend their talents, because as I said earlier, having different perspectives, people see things from different angles, from different ways of life, through different eyes, to quote Maz Kanata very, very loosely. It means that things can only evolve. They have to evolve to stay relevant, and that's what Star Wars has done. Now new audiences are coming along, new fans are coming along to Star Wars, and freaking loving it. And I'm freaking loving it. And I've been here since I was 6 years old, to loosely quote Cassian Andor in a very bad Hispanic accent. Diversity is integral to Star Wars. It's the only way it's going to continue, and long may it continue. Hakuna MaChatter.